I'm Dr. Jam Kothari.
And I'm Dr. Sally Moore. And this is a Myeloma Minutes, a podcast for people affected by myeloma, patients, friends and family.
Hi, Sally. Right, so the second half of our Christmas special is here. So you've had your Christmas lunch. How was it? That's the key thing.
Yeah, well, do you know what I did this year, Jam? Thank you for asking about that, because actually we went out for Christmas lunch and so I didn't have to do a jot of cooking and it was absolutely extraordinary. Waited on hand, and honestly, to be frank with you, I didn't really care what it tasted like. Just not having to do it myself really was a win. So it was different this year. I suspect it was a one-off, but it was great. Thank you for asking. And you, how was yours?
Slightly different. I was on call, but it was okay. And lots of washing up and children running around, but it was lovely. Thank you. So we're here to have the second half of our Christmas special, our brilliant chat and discussion with Professor Karthik Ramasamy and Dr. Kerry Bygrave. They were in full flow. So there are three really interesting topics that they picked as their highlights of the year. So enjoy the rest of this amazing discussion.
Full disclosure, I've been a myeloma consultant for 11 years, and I can honestly say that when I first started, all of my new diagnosis conversations started with, this is treatable but not curable. And, that was at a time where we barely had monoclonal antibodies and PIs and IMiDs were the most common drugs we were using. And so if people stayed in remission for 5 years, we were super happy, but it was pretty much an exception rather than a rule. And I just think that there have been so many breakthroughs, particularly in the area of upfront treatment. And then going back to what I said earlier, our ways of describing patients as either standard risk and high risk has improved so much that for people with, let's say, standard risk disease, so no bad genes, no nasty genetic features, and otherwise things looking good from the offset, it may well be that they can live a perfectly comfortable, normal life, maybe with only one, maybe two lines of treatment, and almost myeloma has been taken out of the equation. And they don't necessarily have to live with that fear of frequent relapses and 5 or 6 lines of treatment, which always used to be the norm when I started. So that's really what's meant about this term functional cure. It's the idea that you can take myeloma out of the equation for someone. You can take it off the table. You can put it to sleep with a treatment that can perhaps offer, median of 5 years survival progression free at the beginning. So 5 years before the cancer comes back. That's amazing. And obviously, 5 years could be 10 years and could be even longer with some of the treatments that have been going through NICE recently. And depending on how old you are when you're diagnosed with myeloma, that might be a good, healthy chunk of life and then see where we get to after that. So I just think it's really nice. It lightened a lot of the conversations that we used to have. And it's really nice to be able to bring more hope to a situation that often didn't feel quite so hopeful. And obviously, everything I've said about high-risk disease unfortunately still stands. We know that not all myeloma patients are the same, but for the ones that have the better risk characteristics, having these conversations, I think is really helpful, and it's a great pleasure in my job.
Amazing, Kerry. I mean, it is. It's so much easier. Well, I guess we're always quite skilled at talking about myeloma, but it's nice to share some good news as well. But Karthik, do you say the same thing when you speak to people in clinic? Are you as optimistic? Do you almost select those patients whereby you can share that degree of optimism?
Many of our patients would like their doctors to be optimistic. And that's something that I've learned over many years because obviously nobody can see the future of how their myeloma journey is going to go. But what we're all invested very much, as we are now, investing our time in it, is we want the best, for them. And that's why we do a lot of clinical trials. As Kerry said, it's really, really exciting to see that we're starting to really turn the dial up in controlling myeloma for a proportion of people and start even using the word cure in a proportion of our patients. I think it's really, really exciting. And as Kerry said, we always have started with this kind of incurable conversation. I mean, it is heartbreaking to do that in the same vein of you have newly diagnosed myeloma, by the way, you are incurable. It has been so challenging, but we're all experts. We do this and we know how to sensitively do this. diagnosed to patients, but it has been really very, very, very difficult, particularly when you're doing it to really young people. I mean, I saw a lady today and she's in her early 40s, and to do that to her is really challenging. You can never be trained to do that, and it is difficult. And in that vein is where the gravity of to be able to tell some of our patients that you could be potentially cured in the future with what we're seeing is really exciting. It's been one of the funnest years in myeloma. I hope we say this every year, but I mean, this year has been pretty phenomenal, really.
It's certainly been a bumper year. And Kerry, just to your point on the age at which they're diagnosed, for these patients who are not high risk, who are older, I spend a lot of time talking about, I'm more worried that I'm going to inadvertently make you sick or kill you from toxicity of drugs than the actual myeloma. And I have quite a lot of conversations like that now. And I'm starting to think more about ideas for, what we call de-intensification studies. When I first started as a consultant, I treated quite a lot of lymphoma, and the Hodgkin's lymphoma guys got there many years ago. And a lot of their studies now about, well, what is the minimum amount of treatment that I need to be cured? And as myeloma doctors, we should be thinking like that now. And I think people are starting to think like that.
It's a great point. And I'm going to give 2 examples for the newly diagnosed older patients to illustrate what you've said. So one is that in September, we were very pleased to see that we had the first quadruplet therapy approved for newly diagnosed transplant eligible patients. So that's isatuximab with bortezomib, lenalidomide, and dexamethasone. And that is one of the ones where I think more than 60% of patients were still in remission 5 years after starting treatment. And we don't yet know what the median average progression-free survival will be. So, that's a real lifeline for this group of patients. But again, in terms of tailoring treatment and finding the sweet spot whereby we give enough treatment to keep the disease under control and not too much that we make the patient unwell. If you start with 4 drugs, it does give you the flexibility to dial down the treatment if you're running into problems, either by reducing the dose of one of them straight away. And to be honest, in that group of 4, it could be either, although most people who listen to this podcast will know that the steroids usually are culprit number 1. But even things like lenalidomide and bortezomib, we can reduce the doses or the frequency to keep patients on treatment and find things that work for them. So ISA-VRD is a breakthrough in this area, but it can be modified for the patient. And then the other one, just going back to the Dex point that I wanted to make, is that in April, myself and Rakesh Popat, who heads up the UK MRA, chaired a session at BSH, so the British Society of Haematology conference in Liverpool. And actually what we talked about was frailty. And making sure that older patients, frailer patients, were still benefiting from all the breakthroughs that have happened in myeloma. And actually, we were delighted to be joined by a chap called Professor Solomon Monnier from Lille, who is part of the French trial group. And he presented some data on the IFM 2017 trial, where one of the arms only included dexamethasone for 2 cycles. And after everything that's been said on this podcast over the last year about Dex, I thought it was a good one to land on and say that there's now a study where they just gave daratumumab with lenalidomide and then 2 cycles with dexamethasone in, and then stopped it altogether and stopped the Dex altogether. And they compared that to lenalidomide and dexamethasone continuously. And what they showed is that the group that had very little, virtually no Dex, did much better. So those patients were in remission for more than 50 months, and the patients that had len with Dex the whole time were in remission for just over 20 months. So more than doubled the progression-free survival with no increase in adverse events from not having dexamethasone. And so there's a really big national study that's validating this idea that maybe we don't need things like steroids anymore. And that was also in a group of patients who were older and frailer, and they had to have an ECOG performance status of at least 2 to get in that trial, which generally means that people are only up and about and doing the things they want to for about 50% of the day. So that is the group that, you want to really avoid doing any harm in. So the original question was about tailoring treatment. And I think there's 2 examples there where we can look to do that and do that more in our practice.
I think it's been my favorite practice-changing trial in the last 12 months. And that's saying a lot when we've had so many new things come on board, because actually we were able to act on that really fairly immediately in our MDT meetings. And we routinely cut the decks and people love it. I mean, it really makes such a difference. So yeah, no, thank you for those really nice points, Kerry.
Okay, so 2 more to go, 1 each. So I think, Karthik, we're bouncing this back to you. And I think you wanted to share with us a nifty gadget. So we've gone from sci-fi to gadgets. Or maybe I'm being a little bit trite here. But do you want to tell us about your last suggestion for us to hear about?
You go away to conferences and you expect to come back with, a new drug. But this time, I was actually pretty struck by this new technology. It's called an on-body device, or in short, OBD is what they call it. And isatuximab is a medicine, as Kerry said, we've now had the ability to use for even newly diagnosed patients. We've been using isatuximab for many, many years for patients with relapsed myeloma. And what they've done, and it's expected to be launched next year for use in the UK for our patients, or probably even worldwide, is this is a very convenient way of giving a subcutaneous injection. For people who are listening, I'm sure most people would have had an injection under their skin. It would have been either growth factor, it could have been Velcade, it could have been daratumumab, or maybe other subcutaneous injections for patients with diabetes and so on and so forth. Some people may be used to it. Some people may be pretty squeamish with every time they have these injections. And what struck me with this particular device was this is going to really revolutionize giving medicines under the skin. And I am not over-exaggerating. You have to start using this device to really see. Essentially, this device loads up the medicine, and loading up the medicine is done by nurses or pharmacists outside. And once that loading up is done, you see signals in the device that it's all fully loaded up. And you pretty much just put it on the skin of the patient of interest. It sticks onto the skin, and it's got a very tiny needle that goes in and then infuses it. And it shows an indication that it has done what needed to do. And one of the things I heard from some of the doctors who are developing it is potentially in the future, you could have 2 or 3 medicines that are being put in like this, which can all be given simultaneously to patients. And that's how beautifully this device has been designed. So I'm really looking forward to using this on-body device for patients. I am even concerned that once this becomes standard of care, everybody will be worried about just doing injections normally the way people have done it. And we've all thought that that was an okay thing to do. So I think it's a real, we talk about drugs, but ultimately, for people who continue to have these injections regularly, I really think this on-body device type technology is going to be really exciting. We're doing it in the modified trials of smoldering myeloma right now in the UK, but I think isatuximab is going to be given through this on-body device for all myeloma patients who are eligible next year. So I'm really excited.
I mean, it sounds like it's incredibly patient-friendly, and I'm sure that the team we've developed have had lots of feedback from patients in terms of, what does this feel like? Does it hurt when it goes in? And I guess it will be really interesting, won't it, to figure that out in clinical practice as we move forward, how well tolerated it is. But it's quite small as well, Karthik. If you were to describe the size of it, what is it? About the size of a Satsuma, maybe? Or
yeah, I think about the size of the Satsuma is what it is. And the interesting thing is all the loading and everything is done outside. And literally what you're doing in front of the patient is just, it's got a sticky under it. You take the sticky out and then you put it on the patient's skin. One of the trials involved giving medicine with the on-body device and giving the same medicine as an injection. And what do you think the patient's response was? They did not want the injection. They wanted the on-body device.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's watch out for that and see how our patients get on with it. It sounds like it's going to be fun. We'll be able to spot the myeloma patients having their treatment from far away, won't we? Because they'll all have these sort of mini Satsuma things attached to their bodies. But great.
Good Christmas fruit analogy, Sally. I like it. There's been a very poor number of Christmas references so far, and Karthik and Kerry, that's going to be going on your feedback. We'll have you back next year, and we're going to expect more. But that it just hurts less. Is that the key thing? That it hurts less and takes less time?
I think it hurts less. It's a more convenient way of giving the treatment. Often the nurse who gives an injection for a longer period of time would have to kind of sit there and very carefully kind of give it. I don't know if you've heard from your patients, certainly one or two of my patients have struggled with, the giving of injections and the variability that happens. It just reduces the variability and it's just more convenient. More and more treatments are being thought of being given in the community. So it just makes things more easier, really. Less variability, consistent way of giving the medicine. Why would you not go for it?
Thank you for listening to the Myeloma Minutes podcast, proudly partnering with Myeloma UK. For more credible myeloma-related material and support, please visit the Myeloma website at myeloma.org.uk. That's myeloma.org.uk. Or call the InfoLine on 0800 980 3332, which you can find in this episode's description. Our final highlight then is coming back to you, Kerry. What do you think has been the final thing to share about this year and the progress that's been made?
I think one thing that all patients want is access to medicines. And it's all very well seeing stuff on the news or internationally about drug breakthroughs. But if we can't access in the UK, then frankly, patients must feel quite powerless. We can sometimes feel powerless as clinicians, not necessarily being able to give them the treatments that we would like to give them. And I think one big thing to take away from everything that's been happening with NICE this year, so the technology appraisals that we go through in the UK to decide whether or not we can use treatments, is 3 new things have been approved for myeloma. So ISA-VRD is one that I mentioned. But then the next 2 bring in new players. So if treating myeloma is like a football team, previously we had 3 main players. So a bit of a strange team, really, but we had these proteasome inhibitors, so Velcade, ixazomib, carfilzomib. They were all sort of in the same family in one group of drugs. And then we had the immunomodulators, so lenalidomide, thalidomide, pomalidomide. They're also all in the same family and they work fairly similarly. And then we have these monoclonal antibodies, so we have daratumumab and isatuximab. And they were the 3 main pillars and the 3 main sort of cornerstones of treatment. And then now we hear a lot about things that target BCMA. And we do have drugs that target BCMA, but they've been restricted to 4th line. So you needed to have had 3 lots of treatments before you got to access them. And those are the drugs like elranatamab and teclistamab that were approved at the end of last year. But what happened this year is that a drug, and in fact a drug combination that targets BCMA, has been approved at 2nd line. And so that is a huge breakthrough, because what we know is actually the earlier you use things, generally the better they work and the longer they'll last for. So this drug in particular is called belantamab, and that is combined with Velcade and dexamethasone. And that's now been made available in the UK, before anywhere else in the world actually, at 2nd line. And the reason it was approved, because actually, if you look at the study data, it seemed to give twice as long a remission compared to what it was compared to, which was Dara-Veldex or DVD. So big breakthrough, a new way of treating myeloma, and available when you're having only your 2nd line of treatment. And back to what we were saying about functional cure, what my wish list would include, if I was allowed a myeloma Christmas wish list, would that be that everybody needs maybe 1, if not 2 lines of treatment. I'd like to get rid of this life where we have to give people 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of therapy and keep scratching around for something to keep them going for a bit longer. I'd like to find treatments that really work well first time, if not 2nd line. And BVD does seem to offer some hope for that. Unfortunately, it won't benefit everybody as well, but it's definitely a breakthrough to have it there and available. And then the final one with the NICE approval this year is talquetamab. That is another bispecific antibody, and that is actually a 5th member of the team. So we've now got a 5-a-side football team, I guess, because talquetamab targets something called GPRC5D, and there aren't any other drugs targeting that available, and that was approved in December. So a Christmas gift.
Kerry, we need a name for your football team. What are you going to call it? Let's anoint it now. It sounds like a right on motley crew, but they sound quite good at what they do. Yeah. It's been amazing, isn't it? Hasn't it just been amazing? And just to hear you say that, I mean, actually for Jam and I, because every time a new appraisal comes out, we think, okay, we could do a podcast. And it's felt like we've had to do a new podcast every other week almost. It's been so thick and fast, but yeah, incredible. At risk of flashing you a little bit, but I think it just speaks to the incredible work of the UKMS, which you have chaired up until now, really, and the advocacy work that you do on behalf of patients to get these drugs over the line, and Myeloma UK as well. So I think the football team are there in terms of the drugs, but behind them are the sort of like, am I stretching this analogy too far? But the people like applauding them and pushing them forward, which is you guys and Myeloma UK in particular.
Yeah, no, it's a huge squad. It's a huge crowd. It's great to mention Myeloma UK, actually, because we wouldn't get where we are without them. We also wouldn't get where we are without the patient representatives. So I was really delighted to be joined by one of my patients in a recent appraisal that I did. And these are people that volunteer, give up their time, share their experience of being someone who's living with myeloma, and often actually quite heartbreakingly being the person who really wants to access the treatment that is up for discussion. And I think hearing that straight from the horse's mouth often helps win arguments, or at least, bring some authenticity to what can sometimes be a bit of a dry health economic environment.
Well said, Kerry. I think we all totally agree with that. I mean, it has been a bumpy year. And guys, before we let you get back to your last minute Amazoning for Christmas, which I have to do, one thing that people should look out for in 2026?
The more kind of here and now very much is, as Kerry has already indicated, it's just about getting more familiar with all the new treatments that we now have myeloma. I mean, there are more choices. I mean, Jam, when you and I used to do MDT 10 years ago, I mean, it used to be, okay, your second line, you only get this treatment. It's third line, you only get this treatment. But that's not the case now. So there's a lot more conversation to be had. There's a lot more choices to be made. There's a lot more perspectives to be kind of taken in. And that's what kind of excites myeloma care now. We really feel that patients have a say, and the doctors have to take everybody's perspective into choosing and kind of personalizing care. And I think that's very much going to be the theme of kind of 2025, with a lot of what we kind of talked about, is going to appear in the future years, potentially getting more and more people out of the myeloma clutches, really.
Kerry, for 2026, anything that you're...
I'm excited for progress on the diagnostics and disease monitoring sort of landscape. So we've talked a little bit about genomics and getting that rolled out in the UK. There are other things such as minimal residual disease testing. I don't know if we covered that yet on the pod, but we can do that on bone marrow. We can do that with blood samples. Those are tools that we could use to decide whether or not to continue treatment or stop treatment. And again, for patients, that would be really helpful information. And then I guess my final one on the diagnosis is actually imaging. So making sure that people are getting the right scans, that they're getting whole body scans right at the beginning. Unfortunately, there still are a lot of centres in the UK where that isn't necessarily the case. And yet what I've seen from my MDTs is that it can make such a huge difference, either when you do a scan and it's negative, or when you do a really sensitive scan and you pick up stuff that you wouldn't see if you didn't do it. It really is life-changing. And, every hospital has an MRI scanner, but not every hospital has a radiologist that can report whole body MRs and enough time to scan all the people that need them for myeloma. So I think there's more work for those of us in the UKMS and other groups to do around getting that bit right as well. It doesn't all have to be about drug costs and access to medicines, although that is huge.
Thank you. A lot to do, but a lot to look forward to. Kerry, Karthik, thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been a pleasure to have the discussion this evening. I think we should do it again, same time next year. See how the year's gone and, the highlights and what's happened. It's a great time to be in the field and a lot of positivity to take through into 2026.
Fully agree. And thanks to both of you.
Oh my goodness, guys. No, thank you. Your time is so precious, but it's so lovely to chat and talk it through. It gives me a lift anyway about what might be ahead, and hopefully good times for many ahead.
Thanks very much.
So Jam, there we have it. Some further amazing ideas about what's happened in 2025. I mean, and again, across quite a range, don't you think? From the fancy on-body device, a new way of delivering treatment, to, Kerry really exploring functional cure and the fact that this is now really part of our day-to-day language, as well as modifying our treatments and getting rid of those horrible, that dexamethasone treatments. And then, I guess to wrap it all up really, a focus on the work that is going on in the UK to get these drugs available, the newer drugs anyway, that we've spoken about this year, available to our patients in clinics. So what a summary that was. I mean, what jumped out at you from what we were talking about there?
Just the breadth of what's happening in the field. That on-body device, it's extremely interesting, and I suspect there'll be many other innovations in this space. Like, we know now that so many drugs, antibody drugs especially, can be given under the skin, but what's the most painless and easiest way of doing that? So I think innovation in that space has, probably lagged behind a bit, but now we have so many drugs. I was really interested to hear about that, but every one of those topics is close to my heart, and it really just highlights what an incredible year for myeloma 2025 has been.
It really has, hasn't it? And it's interesting, at the conference I was at a good few weeks ago now in America, there was so much talk about functional cure. So it's, it's great to hear Kerry talk about it and how that is relevant to people living with myeloma now and in the UK and in hopefully as well all over the world. So, really totally inspiring. And I also hope we've coined a new phrase for the on-body device, the tangerine or Satsuma, or maybe even mince pie device. I'm not quite sure any of those will stick, but let's wait till it comes into day-to-day practice and we can take it from there.
Well, Sally, this is the end of the first year of the Myeloma Minutes podcast. It's been a pleasure to sit here and chat all things myeloma in 2025. I look forward to many more chats in 2026. To all our listeners, thank you so much for all your feedback and all your ideas about things that you want to listen to. Please keep that coming, and we hope that we can provide a variety of really interesting topics for myeloma as we move into the next year. It's
been quite a ride, hasn't it, Jam, so far? But we really, really look forward to just hopefully creating more content that was really useful for people living with myeloma and their families moving into the next year.
And Happy New Year to one and all.
Indeed. Happy New Year, everyone.
This has been the Myeloma Minutes. We hope you found this week's pod engaging, interesting, and above all, understandable and genuinely useful. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow the podcast and share it with anyone who might benefit, from your online support group, your medical team, to friends and family. And as always, if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover in the future episodes, please do get in touch. You can find us at www.themyelomaminutes.com or email us at themyelomaminutes@gmail.com. And you can find us on social media by searching The Myeloma Minutes on Instagram and Facebook. Many thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the next one.